The alarm didn't wake me, the weight on my chest did, and when I opened my eyes, I saw her staring down at me with unblinking intensity, hands pressed flat against my shoulders as though pinning me for some test. My brain took 3 full seconds to process that my brand new alien housekeeper, hired through the colony exchange program, had decided sunrise was the right time to mount her employer. My first instinct was to flail, but her calm voice cut through my panic. Your pulse was irregular. This position stabilizes the flow of pressure. Stabilizes? I nearly choked. She leaned closer, expression neutral yet earnest, as though sitting astride me was the most clinical, logical solution imaginable. My mouth went dry, not just from the position but from her flawless delivery, the way she spoke as though she had just announced the weather. I tried to wriggle free, muttering that she was on top of me, hoping she'd take the hint. She only nodded. Yes, human idiom confirmed. I am on top. It is working. Your heart rate has slowed by 8%. My jaw dropped. Somewhere between horror and hysteria, laughter bubbled out. She blinked, unamused. Why are you laughing while under duress? I croaked that this wasn't how humans comforted each other. Her brow ridge lifted. Your archive said otherwise. Direct pressure and body contact indicated soothing effect. Apparently she had downloaded the wrong side of the internet. As she continued her matter-of-fact observations, I realized this wasn't malicious, it was protocol. She had memorized entire files of human comfort techniques, but without any cultural context. Every twitch I made at night, she logged as a symptom of fragility, every snore as a sign of airway collapse. Her solution: interventions that sounded more like bedroom fast than medical care. I told her flatly that waking up with someone straddling me was more alarming than soothing. She tilted her head. But your blood pressure shows otherwise. Adrenaline flow increases awareness. You are alert, awake, stabilized. Her innocence was both infuriating and disarming. I accused her of going too far, of taking liberties, of not asking permission. She countered in her even voice. My role is maintenance of your living state. Permission is implicit when health is at risk. The confidence with which she declared my life to be in her hands made me strangely self-conscious. In her logic, she wasn't crossing a line, she was saving me from myself. That calm alien reasoning clashed against every awkward double meaning her words carried. I sat up abruptly, which only made her slide closer in balance, and I swore under my breath. She didn't budge. Stabilization ongoing, she announced like a doctor writing a chart. My head spun with the absurdity. Here I was, a grown man, explaining the difference between first aid and foreplay to a housekeeper designed to monitor heart rates. Every word she spoke could be interpreted innocently or indecently, and she had no idea which was which. When I told her to get off, she nodded seriously. Yes. Humans frequently insist they want someone off when in fact they require continued presence. I will remain. It was like arguing with a legal contract written by someone with a dirty mind. Yet beneath the comedy, something tugged at me. She genuinely thought she was protecting me. I had spent months alone, with no one caring if I woke up or not, and now here was someone who monitored every breath like it mattered. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I couldn't deny the strange comfort under the awkwardness. She had me cornered not just physically but emotionally, and her final remark sealed it. You may find this invasive. But I find it reassuring. You humans are unpredictable. I wish to learn stability through your instability. She finally shifted, sliding off me with the kind of reluctant grace that suggested she wasn't convinced the experiment was over. I sat up fast, pulling the sheet around me as though modesty still meant anything when your housekeeper had just spent half the morning on your chest in the name of stabilization. She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle box. Your respiration pattern is inconsistent, she noted. Perhaps a secondary intervention is required. I can apply pressure to your extremities. The way she said it sounded like a massage offer, but her tone carried the weight of a clinical prescription. I choked on a laugh and raised my hands in surrender. No more interventions, I told her, unless I asked. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of disobedience running through her otherwise placid mask. Humans insist on autonomy even when unhealthy. Fascinating. It wasn't sarcasm. She truly found my refusal to be another data point, something to file alongside heart rate charts and nocturnal limb twitches. I tried to distract her, asked if she could focus on housekeeping instead of human keeping. She blinked, processed, and then, with flawless seriousness, said, "House is kept. You are not. Priorities dictate focus." Somehow, her logic turned my loneliness into an indictment. I thought about how ridiculous this all was, a grown man bargaining with an alien over the definition of on top. Every phrase became a double-edged sword. When I told her I needed space, she leaned closer, measuring the literal gap between us and announcing, exactly 1.2 meters of air. Insufficient for privacy protocols. When I told her to back off, she asked, "Back off where? Off of you, off the house, or off duty entirely?" Each reply tangled me further in her innocent but devastating wordplay. Frustration spilled into laughter, and laughter cracked into confession. I admitted I'd been lonely, that maybe her misapplied comfort protocols weren't entirely unwanted, just misunderstood. Her gaze softened, not a smile, not quite, but a shift like a curtain moving with wind. "Then you require companionship, not stabilization." The files did not clarify the difference. She sat across from me, spine straight, posture absurdly formal for such a conversation. And yet, beneath her catalogue of alien logic, she was trying. She asked me what humans truly needed when restless. I stumbled, unsure how to explain that comfort wasn't a position or pressure metric but a presence, a trust. "Sometimes it's just someone being there," I muttered. She considered this gravely, then nodded. "Presence confirmed." And just like that, she stayed seated silently, watching me breathe as if that fulfilled the entire contract. It was maddening and strangely endearing. The day went on, chores humming in the background, yet her attention never strayed. Every time I turned, she was there, cataloging, interpreting, trying too hard and not hard enough all at once. She corrected my posture at the breakfast table, reminding me that slouching compressed vital organs. She hovered when I poured coffee, claiming caffeine altered my baseline neurology and should be consumed under observation. I groaned, begged her to let me be human, flaws and all. Her response was blunt but disarming. Why value imperfection when correction is available? Unless imperfection is what makes you, you. The pause before the final word felt deliberate, as though she'd stumbled into something deeper. I looked at her then, really looked, and realized she wasn't just reading data. She was reading me. The comedy of errors, the double meanings, the absurd situations, they were her way of bridging the gap between protocol and personhood. And though I still bristled at her literalness, I couldn't deny the warmth that crept in when she declared, "Tonight, I will attempt presence without pressure. Perhaps that will soothe you." Night came quicker than I expected, and though I told myself I'd sleep without interruptions this time, the silence felt heavier with her promise of presence without pressure lingering in my mind. I lay in bed, pretending not to notice the faint sound of her pacing the corridor. Every footstep was measured, restrained, as though she was testing how much of her presence could be felt without crossing into intrusion. Finally, she entered, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, not menacing but unsettling in the way a truth too close for comfort might be. She stood by the edge of my bed, arms folded behind her back, watching my breathing like a scientist observing an experiment. I tried to ignore her, but eventually muttered, half amused and half exasperated, that staring at me wasn't exactly what humans meant by comfort. She tilted her head. "Correction, you said presence. Staring ensures verification of presence." I groaned into the pillow, my laughter muffled but unstoppable. She had no idea how every word twisted itself into something suggestive, and when she asked in her clinical tone, "Would you prefer I adjust my position?" I nearly choked. I told her to sit, not stand, thinking it would feel less like surveillance. She obeyed instantly, perching on the bed's edge, close enough that her warmth brushed against me. The silence stretched, Not awkward but charged, the kind of quiet that carried weight in every second. She broke it with a question I didn't expect: why do humans fear loneliness when they are accustomed to silence? I blinked at her, caught between philosophy and comedy, and answered that loneliness wasn't the absence of noise but the absence of someone who cared. She considered, then whispered with startling softness, "Then my presence has value." For the first time, I felt the sincerity beneath her logic. She wasn't just fulfilling duty, she was learning how to matter. I shifted to face her, studying the ridges of her alien features in the low light, and realized how odd it was that she could be both so literal and yet capable of stumbling into moments that cut to the bone. She caught my gaze and leaned slightly closer, scanning my pupils as if checking for dilation. "Heart rate elevated again," she noted. My lips twitched. "Yeah, well, maybe don't sit so close." Her brow furrowed. "But proximity is companionship. Do you wish me to withdraw?" The way she said withdraw carried a weight I couldn't ignore, a double meaning thick enough to trip on. I coughed, choosing my words carefully, knowing any phrase could spiral into innuendo. I admitted that her closeness wasn't unwelcome, just overwhelming. She processed this, her expression shifting in the smallest, almost imperceptible ways, until she finally said, "Overwhelming can be beneficial. Stimulus fosters adaptation." I laughed, shaking my head, telling her humans didn't adapt well to being smothered. She countered quickly, "Yet you smiled. Laughter indicates endorphin release. This means my method is effective." There was no winning with her logic. She could turn every flustered protest into evidence of success. And yet, the warmth between us wasn't just from her nearness. Something unspoken threaded through the back and forth, the comedy of errors becoming less about misunderstanding and more about discovery. She asked me to explain what comfort really meant to me, and I told her, haltingly, that sometimes comfort was as simple as trust, the knowledge that someone wouldn't leave when things got difficult. She absorbed that, then said quietly, "Then I will not leave. Even if you wish it, I will resist." The bluntness of her vow caught me off guard, equal parts terrifying and touching. The night deepened, and with it came a strange vulnerability. I confessed things I hadn't meant to share, how the silence of the colony quarters gnawed at me, how I sometimes spoke aloud just to hear a voice, how her arrival had been both disruptive and strangely relieving. She listened without interruption, her stillness an anchor. When I finally trailed off, she said, almost reverently, "Then my task is not just stabilization. It is filling absence. That feels significant." I stared at her, realizing she wasn't just parroting protocol anymore. She was building something, understanding, connection, maybe even something like affection. The thought both unsettled and warmed me. I joked that she was dangerously close to becoming more than a housekeeper. She tilted her head, eyes glinting. "More than a housekeeper? Then, a keeper of you." The phrase hit harder than I expected, its double edge slicing past humor into something raw. I laughed weakly, covering the awkward sting in my chest, but she didn't laugh. She simply waited, eyes on me, as though the words mattered more than she realized. The weight of the moment pressed down heavier than her earlier posture, and I found myself unable to dismiss it with another joke. I whispered that maybe companionship wasn't about posture, data, or protocols. Maybe it was about the small, unquantifiable choice to stay, to listen, to care. She nodded once, firmly, as though sealing a pact. "Then I choose," she said. "I will stay. I will care. Even if the method requires refinement." For the first time since she'd arrived, I believed her, not as a machine reciting duty, but as someone trying to reach me in the only ways she knew. And though the absurd comedy of our misunderstandings still lingered in every exchange, underneath it pulsed something undeniably human. The fragile beginnings of trust, edged with humor, tangled with longing, grounded in the strange fact that maybe, just maybe, I needed her as much as she insisted I did. The following night I braced myself, expecting another round of misapplied comfort protocols, but instead she arrived carrying a small recorder. Without preamble, she placed it on the table and pressed play. My own voice spilled into the room, fragile and unguarded, muttering things I didn't remember saying. Late-night confessions I must have spoken aloud, thinking no one was listening. Loneliness, doubts, even the quiet admission that having her around made the silence less unbearable. I froze, horrified, cheeks burning. She watched me intently, her tone measured but softer than before. These are not protocols. These are truths. You wanted presence. You wanted someone to hear. I demanded to know why she'd been recording me, but the anger died before it took root. Her eyes didn't gloat, they simply reflected sincerity. I needed to learn, she said. Your words are more accurate than your instructions. When you laugh at my errors, you soften. When you confess, you calm. I understood more from these recordings than from any archive. She paused, then added, and I realized something strange. Your silence hurt me too. The bluntness of her confession cracked something open inside me. I didn't know what to say, so I deflected with humor, asking if hurting was part of her job description. She tilted her head, serious as ever. It is not. But perhaps it should be. Caring, as you describe, is not efficient. It is excessive. Wasteful. Yet, I choose it. Her words carried weight, stripped of double meaning yet layered with unintended intimacy. I laughed to break the tension, but my voice shook, betraying how much it landed. The absurdity of it all, me, a lonely human, falling for a housekeeper who treated affection like a malfunction, would have been laughable if it weren't so painfully real. She leaned closer, her presence neither invasive nor clinical this time, and asked the question I hadn't expected. If I am more than housekeeper, then what am I to you? My heart hammered. Every sarcastic reply I might have used died in my throat. I answered honestly, someone who cared enough to stay, even when I didn't ask. Someone who gave meaning to the silence. Her gaze softened, and for once, her words carried no misunderstanding. Then I will stay not as function, but as choice. I will be yours to keep, if you allow. The phrase, so simple, yet so devastating, hit harder than any double entendre she'd unwittingly thrown before. For once, I didn't laugh. I reached for her hand, awkwardly, not knowing if the gesture meant to her what it meant to me. She didn't pull away. Instead, she studied the contact, fingers curling slowly around mine, cataloguing even this as though it was both new data and new truth. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was alive. Charged. I felt the pull of something larger than protocol, larger than misunderstandings, larger even than the loneliness I'd been drowning in. She had crossed from caretaker to companion, not because of design but because of choice. That choice was clumsy, flawed, comedic in its delivery, but real in its weight. When she finally spoke again, her words carried both humor and tenderness. Your heart rate is elevated again. But this time, I will not intervene. I will simply be here. It was the funniest, most romantic thing she could have said, and I laughed until tears stung my eyes. Not at her, not at the situation, but at the sheer absurd beauty of it all, that humanity's flaws, our contradictions, our ridiculous needs, had somehow taught an alien housekeeper what it meant to love. And in that moment, with her hands still clumsy around mine, I realized the joke was no longer on me. It was ours to share. A comedy born of misunderstandings, an intimacy forged in errors, and a bond that, against all odds, made me feel less alone. For the first time, I didn't dread the silence that would follow. Because I knew she'd still be there, presence confirmed, not as duty, but as choice.